Hello there! I guess you are interested in communism, are you? Well, let me help you out. So, I am from a Balkan state called Bulgaria. We sometimes call our country Absurdistan. To be honest, all Balkan countries do. One of the reasons, once we were communists. Some people, unfortunately, still are. So if you consider communism for your country, here are 7 short stories that will, hopefully, put some sense in you. In 1956, an inspection took place at a cannery plant called 7 Partisans. This is worth it even just for the name. The inspection found 13,000 cases of spoiled cans. About 10% of the jars were broken. A third of the tomato, whatever floats your boat, production was unfit for consumption. The damage was for thousands of levs. This is still the local currency, by the way. In 1960, the same factory will declare it produced goods for 500,000 that it didn't produce at all. All the unproduced goods were for almost 2 million and 4 tons of food would be scrapped. At the same time, there will be undelivered production for 5 million and overstock for 6 million. All of it will be wasted, of course. In 1968, they will manage to break every 5th glass jar. In order to pay wages, they will get a loan. The 17 partisans will also work at loss in the 70s. And in 86, from the plan of first quality products, they will manage to do only 8.4%. In 1987, they will cover only a third of the plan because of the unusual colds, long droughts and high temperatures. Altogether, new machinery were never purchased. A short story of the Sasho-Kofrogiev industrial factory. In the 60s, they were producing ovens, gas meters, scales and kitchen equipment. They pledged 100% quota production. This could not have been further from the truth. They reported 4 industrial ovens as ready, but they were not sent for use. They were just not finished. The Ministry of Defense rejected 400 massive cooking pots for the army. The hoods were too small and kept falling in the pots. Life can be like this, I guess. They did manage to finish 30,000 scales for the USSR. The scales were returned for not being up to standard. They did not follow the blueprint, used different materials and did not measure correctly. They produced few kitchens for Cuba and forgot all about the scoops. They just did not produce them. The kitchens were waiting for the scoops at the docks. 60% of the workers left the factory. All work plans flew out the window. Someone decided that only scales would be produced there. Still, there were no workers and production was lagging. Another order from the Ministry of Defense was rejected. From another 30,000 scales for the USSR, nothing was shipped. There were a handful produced, but they were scrapped. Even the head of the factory knew the scales were not to be accepted. A new line for scales were built though, including a fancy painting unit. Nobody noticed that the order was just for 400 scales and all of the constructions were pointless. For all these mistakes, the internal police blamed a few people that are, well, not communists, and a person who studied in Germany. What happened to them we do not know. Yet the internal police in Bulgaria, the so-called DC, was known to shoot people for less. The productivity fell to 40%. The reason? There were no bakelite parts from another factory. This is because they got no bakelite from another factory, and this is because they got no wood flour from a mill. Nobody told the wood mill they were supposed to produce or deliver it. The internal police tightened the bolts, and the scales for the USSR were finally produced. Don't get too excited though. Someone forgot to inform the rails. The scales waited at the station, rain fell, scales got rusty. Despite all of this, they got a certificate of quality by the state agency, Bulgar Control. I would like to know what was explained to the USSR. The factory got an order for lathe parts. It was marked as received, produced and shipped. It was not even begun. But it was accounted for. The state of the factory was so bad the workers were stealing machinery bought from the US through the front gate. So, surprise, the factory was no more. I guess the ministry had enough of it. Since such factory was needed, another one was built. Can you guess what happened? Workers did not follow working hours, plans and quality. The plans were only being implemented in volume. Complaints were massive. There were no new machines and only old types of scales were produced. Yet a seller buys the non-existing scales and stores them, and both are covering their economic plans, on paper. The factory was in the news though, with something good. For the first workday of the new year they produced 10 extra scales. This of course is a lie. Usually clients come to get their scales but can't. There are none produced. The director admits problems, lack of staff and financial issues. Promises new models of scales and better quality. This never happens. In the 80s the quality complaints are massive. An order from Germany will never be started because lots of the production capabilities are just on paper. In the 90s, again, lots of new better models are promised. Again, no. From 6 scales sent to Austria without defects is only 1. There are no new clients, old ones leave. The workers also leave. New scales were never produced. The factory bankrupts. I guess banana for scale. In the 70s, a tire factory begins its life. It is not only the biggest and the most modern in Bulgaria, but in the region. 8 years later, the Ministry of Internal Affairs reports a big drop in quality and document forgery. Turns out that the rubber is measured by shovels, or just by eye. The machines that were bought from France lack maintenance and are fixed with what's around. A leaking pipe will be covered with rugs. The pressure inside will not be the same. And if it spills to a cable, God help us all. The French committee that will inspect their machines will recommend a big rebuild, but it will be denied. Automated dosing system will be delivered from Germany. It will not become operational before the warranty expires. So rubber is still eyeballed. This leads to scrapping between 4 and 5 tons of material per day. For quality controls are hired young guys that have no working experience. Wasted production keeps piling up. There are frequent fires, materials are not received on schedule and are kept the wrong way. In only 5 days, in 1979, 1,200 tires will be scrapped. For all this, in the same year, there was a tire shortage in Bulgaria. So a new program begins. Tire for tire. You turn your old tires in and you get new, recycled tires. In 1989, the factory is in a dire state. In one workshop, because of the high temperature, dust and gases, work only Vietnamese workers. Better there than home, I guess. In the factory, systems provided from Pirelli, Italy, France and Germany stay unused. In 1989 though, a system for quality control is introduced. It will conclude that 70% of the first quality tires for Bulgaria are not suited at all by Western standards. The rubber is still measured in shovels. As a consequence, the road accidents in Bulgaria keep climbing. The casualties for 1951 are 202 people. For 61, 450 people. For 69, more than 1,000. And more than 1,050 in the 90s. I guess tires can be an issue. Can you bankrupt a business by producing? Yes, in communism. A factory in a small city in Bulgaria started work in 1971. It produced lathes. A welding department was built later. It was not a part of the original plan. In 1972, it did 69% of its quota. The parts it needed were again not delivered on time. Not a single working control unit was delivered. First they were repaired, then produced in the factory. For the whole 1972, it worked 1/3 of the time. The biggest absurd is that for 100 lev of production, the calculated expense was 163 lev, and the real expense was 186 lev. The factory was built to run on a loss. Stay with me. In 1986, the quota was lowered and still not reached. The scrap production was huge. Big part of the factory was not working at all. Workers came late and went home early. The only product that was sold with profit was the universal lathe C8C. In the same year, the factory got a loan to pay wages. Each month it needed to pay 8,000 to the workers and 1.5 million in interest alone. In 1988, the director, Semyon Sumnaliev, reported a 4.5 million debt, fired 120 workers, and buys no new technologies. If the lathes are sold by the so-called First Direction, the communist countries, there will be a profit of 4K per unit. But Bulgaria is in need of foreign currency, so they are sold by the so-called Second Direction, the West. And in order to be competitive, the prices are lowered, so they make a loss of 1.3K per unit. In the 70s, the military-industrial complex called Metalhim begins work in Bulgaria. Exporter of the goods will be Kintex. 14 years later, Metalhim will be in debt of 770 million. The reason? Weapons are sent to countries that cannot pay for them. In 1987, the debt will be more than $1 billion, and income will be down with 30%. Guns that cannot be produced will be taken from the National Reserve. Contracts for over $400 million will be cancelled. Russian and Czech weapons will be bought and sold as Bulgarian. Poor quality production will include APC parts, rockets, grenades, heat-seeking warheads. Just the faulty heat seekers will be more than 6,000 pieces. Poor welds will be masked with plasticine and painted over. In the warehouses will be stored products with poor quality. This will include artillery shells that explode in the barrel. Just in 1978, the returned production is for 25 million. In the end of the 80s, almost all factories work at a loss. Production is down 50% and income with 5 million. In a single factory, there will be unsold weapons for 160 million and restock of 5,000 tons of explosives. The audit in 1990 will declare losses for thousands of millions. There was a boom in crime in the 80s. In the cities, every seventh had a sentence for a violent crime. This would be murder, rape, or injury. Every seventh. And in the villages, every fourth. On the 6th of October 1979, in the capital, the body of a young woman was found. The reason of death, 35 stab wounds. The 18-year-old was known to the police for prostitution. She also had syphilis. In less than 3 weeks, another body was found, a 31-year-old woman. This time there were 37 knife wounds. She was also known for prostitution. More victims were found, one even made it to the ER before passing. The killer was also found, a 24-year-old known for different crimes committed: killings, rapes, beatings, and theft. He was also working for the Ministry of Internal Affairs. He was a police officer. The reason for the killing spree was the syphilis he got from the first victim. His first murder he committed only at 18. after an argument in a pub. The victim, a neighbor of his. None of the murders went in the news. Censorship was working hard. By that time people knew of a serial killer, but this was spread only by gossip. No one knew there were more. What was a killer doing in the Ministry of Internal Affairs at all? How the hell did he become a cop? Corruption. Well, the people were living a calm life, not knowing all of this. What happened with that guy we do not know. There was a death sentence back in those days. And while we are on the topic, the last death sentence in communist Bulgaria was on the 4th of November 1989, just 6 days before the end of the regime. The sentenced was Georgy Alinsky. The crime, systematic sabotage against the people. He damaged several times the ski lift in a mountain resort. In 1987, a Bulgarian delegation led by the first man in Bulgaria, Todor Zhivkov, was in China. They were opening a Bulgarian-made production line for soft drinks. Zhivkov made a speech and pushed the start button. Probably a red one. Anyways. What happened was recorded by Petr Modenov, another top party member at the event. A person that will later be a prime minister. Here is the quote. The production line started buzzing and shaking, and the bottles started moving. First to the filling station, then to the sealing station. Next to me was Philip Markov, the future ambassador to Peking. He was constantly mumbling, "You will see that this machine will break." Those prophecies were based on his year-long experience of sales representative in Peking. He sold over 2,000 forklifts to the Chinese, of which by now none was functional. It would seem that he cursed our engineered invention because shortly after the sealing station stopped working. The Bulgarian technicians started running around while the lemonade bottles were falling and breaking. All of a sudden, there was a loud bang, and the sad creation of the Bulgarian technical genius stopped for good. End of Petr Modenov's quote. There were a lot of Bulgarians that went to work abroad. There was no qualification needed, just to know the right people. The Bulgarian building companies abroad, owned by the government that is, were constantly using workers and material to build for others. To build anything but what they were supposed to, and get extra cash. The Bulgarian workers in Libya were into moonshine business. Hundreds of them were jailed, yet the high voltage power lines that they had to build were not even started. From an agricultural project in Libya, Bulgaria lost $5 million. Another loss was from a poultry plant. Cold storage facility in Sudan costed $4 million. Project in Kuwait, $6 million. Poor drilling in Syria costed $3 million. Another adventure there, $2 more millions. Losses in Turkey and Iraq will do damage for exporting machinery for $35 million. A Bulgarian oil company will try working in Libya too. It gambled on areas that Western companies didn't want. The Libyan desert sands swallowed over $200 million. The state was buying bankrupt businesses everywhere. Greece, East Germany, even the West. This was not even for profit. It was just to get out of the country and grab some state cash. Anyways, what was the purpose of all this? Not much, to be honest. There were way worse communists out there. And still are, for what it's worth. What we had was communism light. So if you consider being a commie, please don't, for the sake of both your karma and the rest of us. Thank you for your attention. I wish you immortality.